All right, today I want to talk about a really important piece in everyone's tackle, and that is the leader material that they use. For me, I'm a huge fan of fluorocarbon leader, and when I look at leaders and leader material in general, I only look at performance. And the reason for that is you don't want to be like this or like that. And the reason for that, and the reason why that all happened, was I was looking through different fluorocarbon leaders and I tried a whole bunch of different brands. I searched far and wide, and I finally came up with the reasons that I personally like fluorocarbon over monofilament, over different, or I guess the Blue Label Cigar fluorocarbon over other fluorocarbon leaders. And the biggest thing for me is durability. Now, when you're fighting a really big bass, and that bass, and where I live on Cape Ann, which is the North Shore of Massachusetts, the rocks are incredibly sharp. And so what I have to deal with most of the time is really big fish running into really sharp rocks. So basically nothing's gonna hold up with that, but you'd be very surprised at what the Blue Label Cigar fluorocarbon can withstand, and that is a beating, and it can scrape across those rocks for a long time before it actually ends up breaking. It does fray. I always say that you have to really make sure, especially before you go fish again, but like after each fish you catch, I always like to feel my line, or if I think I might have nicked a rock retrieving a plug, I always feel my line just to make sure there's no nicks in it. But the crazy part about the line is, even if you have a little bit of fray or nicks in your line itself, it does an unbelievable job at not breaking. And that is the most important part to me. I don't really care if one line is a little bit more clear than the other. See, I feel like there's a few common misconceptions when it comes to using leader material and all of that. Using leader material is in like, what leader material do you use? So monofilament floats a little bit more than fluorocarbon does. Fluorocarbon will sink a little bit more. I mean, there's all these technical aspects to it, like monofilament stretches a little bit more than fluorocarbon. But for me personally, I'm going off of like the number one thing that I care about, and everything else kind of goes out the window, and that's durability. All the gear I use is basically performance based in my mind. If it does something better than another thing, that's when I'm gonna go look like I'm gonna use your product, basically. And that Blue Label Cigar is the product that I use. Yes, fluorocarbon is more expensive than monofilament line, although if you really wanna not lose fish and you wanna eliminate a lot of breaking off, whether that comes to leadering a bass or it comes to bass diving into rocks, if you have bad leader material and you hit a sharp rock, it's gonna go through it like a knife through butter. And the thing is, if you have no leader material and you go straight braid will break on rocks very quick. So it is best to have that fluorocarbon leader. You still get the castability of braided line, and I'll do a separate video on the braided line that I use, which again, very performance based in the reasons why I use that line. But there's a few things that I want to talk about here. So when it comes to fluorocarbon, there's a few things that drive people crazy. One of which is the fact that it sinks. And if you're using a really heavy leader and you're using a light lure, it's going to sink a little bit more, and it can impede the action of it. It's also a lot stiffer, so it's less malleable, which makes it harder to tie knots with. I personally use the improved clench knot as the knot that I tie with all my fluorocarbon line. I generally do, because everybody asks me what knots do you tie with different lures, so I'm just gonna go through that quick. For this specifically, I will use the improved clench knot with 4 wraps, and I use that from basically, like, you can do more when you get down to the 20. Like if you get down to 20-pound test line, I will end up doing more wraps on the line. I will end up doing maybe 6 wraps, 6 to 8 with 20-pound leader. But when you get above 24 seems like very good for anything over 20 pound. The abrasion resistance is unbelievable on these leaders. I've had big bluefish chewing on them, and they've withstood a lot of damage from the bluefish, and an impressive amount. Like, you'll reel in your lure and it will just be all chewed up, and somehow, and the line is frayed and everything like that, and somehow it is not broken. And that's because the Blue Label Seaguar, to me, is the best, most durable fluorocarbon on the market right now. I've used a ton of other fluorocarbons. I've had a lot of tragic bass losses due to trying out different fluorocarbons. So I will give you a quick range of the fluorocarbon leaders that I personally use. I generally use between 20 pound fluorocarbon up to 80 pound fluorocarbon for striped bass fishing. That's what I personally use. I'll use heavier stuff and lighter stuff, but mostly heavier stuff depending on the scenario that I'm in. Sometimes I need that like extra durability, and I might bump up to 100 pound, especially if I'm going for different species of fish that I get a lot larger, such as tarpon. I might bump up to a little bit heavier leader, but for the most part, the 40 pound fluorocarbon Blue Label Seaguar is my go-to, no matter where I'm fishing or what I'm fishing for. I think that I can fish that well with most lighter plugs and still have the durability that I need if I hook into a really big fish and it takes me into the rocks, which happens a lot. And as you've seen in those two clips there, I was testing out a different fluorocarbon, and I ended up breaking off twice in that night testing a different fluorocarbon. So that was a tragic time for me because I really wanted to land those big fish, and it was during a hurricane and there's a ton of big bass, and I kept breaking off, and that was just because those striped bass are like digging deep in the current and breaking me off on rocks, and I just had no hope with the gear I was using. And the wildest part was I was using 60 pound fluoro leader, and it was cutting it like butter. So you have to choose your leader material wisely. I really believe that it is one of the most important parts of your tackle. I think that if you have any little doubt in your tackle itself, it's gonna lead to you not being as confident, especially when you hook into the fish. And that's always gonna be in the back of your mind. Ooh, I should have changed my leader. And I had one of those scenarios this year where I had 50 pound fluorocarbon leader. I was hooked into a really big bass. It was in a kind of a sketchy spot, and it was running super hard. And I just felt like I couldn't tighten up even more than I was, or I couldn't grab the spool and stop that fish, and I ended up losing it. And that was because I didn't have the confidence in my tackle that I should have had, and I should have been fishing heavier fluorocarbon for that scenario. But the moral of that story is, depending on what you're using for your leader material, that is a big piece that takes the brunt of the abuse that those striped bass and other fish are going to inflict to your gear. The other big part of that is the tackle that's on your plug itself. So whether that's hooks, split rings, I mean, exactly how the plug itself or the lure itself is rigged up with the leader and the word that I'm looking for is the through wiring of the plug. That took me a little bit, but I got there. The through wiring of the plug, or it is the hooks, the split rings, all of that's gonna take a lot of the abuse from the fish. But the other thing that's gonna take a lot of the abuse from the fish is that leader material. So make sure that you look into the Blue Label Seaguar if you haven't fished this before. I personally think it's the most durable fluorocarbon. If you're interested in picking up some Blue Label Seaguar, go to the link in my description below, go to the Fisherman's Source, and you can pick up all these fluorocarbon leaders. They ship real quick, so wherever you are in the country or in the Northeast or wherever you are, they're gonna get you that stuff real quick. So go to the link in my description, pick some of this stuff up. I really believe in the Blue Label Seaguar fluorocarbon. I think that it is, as far as fluorocarbon leaders go, or fluorocarbon materials go, or leader materials go, this is the best leader material that I've personally used. So if you're interested in fishing something that should perform to the highest degree. Pick some of this stuff up. I highly suggest it. All right, if you guys like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.